it's been 10 years since the book is published, and one could argue nothing has really changed, right? Would you agree? Disagree?
I would say some things have changed and there's more awareness, but that doesn't mean we've had the right kind of impact or shifts that need to happen, because people fall into their patterns and areas of comfort. And we, unfortunately, in the marketing world we live in today, are focused on risk mitigation and short-termism. And the only way that you really can change and have a shift from a paradigm perspective, I believe, is to focus on the long term. And so you need incentives to be aligned to that more closely than the way they are today.
The big question: how quickly can brands and businesses change and modernize in response to the changing demographics globally? The future of work, demand for modernizing the practice of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and industry corrections. This is why we started the Change Podcast by Reframe, to help people leaders like you get answers that accelerate inclusive change and growth that reflects where the world is going. Get ready as we host a discussion with people leaders faced with the same challenges and modernize their approach to solving a decades-old problem. I'm your host, Jeffrey L. Bowman.
The title for episode 1 is Challenging the Industry from the Inside Out. I interviewed Marla Kaplowitz, the CEO of the Industry Association 4As. We discuss her career journey, the role the 4As plays in advocating for agencies, and the challenges of achieving inclusivity within the marketing and communications industry. We explore the evolution of advertising, the importance of media transparency, and the future of the agency model. As she prepares to leave the 4As, Marla reflects on her leadership experience and the need for continued advocacy and change from within the industry. Join me. I'm excited to dig in, learn more about Marla and her impact in building an inclusive industry for all. Marla, welcome, and thank you for joining the Change Podcast by Reframe. It's quite an honor and privilege to have Marla on this episode. I wanted to start off the season with a little bit of a revisionist history, and very similar to the way that we start the book. We talk about the history of advertising, the role of the agencies in terms of how they played into maturing of the industry, because 40s, it was predominantly print and radio. Then obviously things change with the advent of technology and the black box. And so, want to welcome you to season 1. And Marla, if you could just, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do on a day-to-day basis, I think it'll be helpful for the audience.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. So I currently am the CEO of the 4As, which is the American Association of Advertising Agencies, the trade association that supports and represents and advocates on behalf of agencies in the U.S. I've been here for nearly 8 years, and prior to that spent 30 years on the agency side, both full service advertising agencies as well as media agencies, and just absolutely passionate about this business and the role that agencies provide in the marketing landscape.
No, thank you. Thank you for that. And one of the things that I think is really interesting for a lot of folks who stumble upon this industry, and even for me, I was told somewhat of a cottage industry. So how did you find out about the industry? What inspired you? And you continue to build your career and life?
It's such a good point, because I grew up in Los Angeles, not necessarily the mecca of advertising. Went to school at UC Santa Barbara thinking I wanted to be a lawyer, and then quickly realized, wait, 4 years, then 3 more years. Now I'll go do something different. And my sophomore year took a communications course, and Ogilvy on Advertising was one of the books that we had access to. And I thought advertising or broadcasting or journalism, something in the communications marketing space seemed interesting, and then just sort of fixated on advertising. And I was, there it is, there's the book. I have it too. And I was fortunate that a family friend, her sister lived in New York, worked for Ted Bates in the research side, strategic planning. And then I also had an aunt who had a cousin who worked at NWR. So I was able just to talk to them about the business. But then I also did an internship at a little ad agency in Santa Barbara the summer before my senior year, and just kept focusing on what could I do. And I was very interested in media, which not a lot of people were at that time. People wanted account management, but I really enjoyed understanding more of the psychology and the human element. And so I was a sociology major, and that's what attracted me to media planning. And then I just sent out dozens of resumes to New York agencies. I had started subscribing to Adweek, and the next thing I knew, I came to New York, interviewed, and had a couple offers at the end of 2 weeks, and focused on DMB&B because they, in my view, had the best training program. And that's how I got my start. Not making a lot of money and figuring out how I could live off of a very meager salary, walk to work, work past 7 to get extra money. And at least the price of a slice of pizza and a Diet Coke wasn't too expensive.
No, those are like the golden years in terms of what the industry was and what it meant. Now, did you work on Madison Avenue? Because I know that's like a big
No,
thing.
I never worked on Madison Avenue. I worked on 3rd Avenue and then Broadway and 8th Avenue, but never made it to the famed Madison.
Well, no, and it seems like you found something that you loved, and with that,
I did. I was lucky.
very, very lucky, and you built a career. When we talk about in terms of the role that the industry plays in terms of the impact, it's a pretty heavy responsibility. And so, how did you make the pivot from providing the services to being an advocate of the industry?
I always was an advocate from the inside, and even early days when I was at DMB&B, I was helping teach as part of the training program. I always enjoyed mentoring people and coaching, and I was very fortunate that I was always part of an interviewing team for entry-level people on the media side. And then as I got more senior, I was able to help with the planning team and moving people around and identifying where people would be best resourced on teams. So I always kind of had that affinity, but just was passionate about the business. And that was part of what drew me to coming to the 4As, because I realized I could take my advocacy for an agency or a holding company and do it on a broader level. But I just really believed in the power of client service and helping people and a business really grow and evolve, and knowing that I could touch it in some way. And that's similar to what I do at the 4As, which is just member service and helping agencies grow and thrive.
And for those who may not be as familiar, like what's a day in a life or a year in a life like leading the 4As Industry Association?
It's a true privilege to be in this role, and I recognize that not a lot of people get this opportunity, and so I feel really fortunate. But I also recognize that every day is different, which is exciting. I need that dynamism in a day. But it's everything from what do we need to be thinking about that's happening in Washington, D.C. or at the state level as it relates to government relations, data privacy, tax deductibility, AI legislation that may be happening, paying attention to that, looking at what our partnerships can be to help the agencies, whether it's with AI and how that's evolving, and staying on top of what's happening with the team and their connection to different industry cohorts, talking about new business. That's still a big, rich area for agencies to really be addressing, and how we can partner more with the ANA, for example, on driving different opportunities like a ubiquitous RFI, so people don't have to keep filling out lots of different templates. Yeah. Yes, exactly. It's just like a Common App. That's a very good analogy. I like that. And then I could be meeting with members. I really enjoyed traveling to meet with members, spending time with them, hearing what their challenges are and what we as the 4As can do to help. Meeting with my internal team on where is our P&L at? What do we need to be doing? We're in the midst of business planning right now. So thinking about not just a look back, but what can we do ahead? And the way that we always start our business planning is what are the most frequent questions we're getting from members, and what are, I would say, their big pressure points that we can help try and solve. But we also need to understand, how do we scale that given the breadth and diversity of our membership?
And so that everyone listening understands the gravity of who you represent. I mean, how many members are in the 4As?
So we have over 600 agencies with roughly 1,200 offices, and we say that group typically directs close to 85, helps direct roughly 85% of the media spend in the US. It's kind of hard to get that accurate, but it's pretty significant when you look at the types of not only agencies, but the clients and the Fortune 500. But we also have agencies that are representing small local clients too. And I think that's what's really powerful, is it's a real breadth of small, medium, large people that are doing creative work, media, PR, experiential, creator. It's just such a variety, and it keeps growing, which is what I think is so powerful about the industry.
Yeah, and I think one last question, in terms of like when you started your vision at that particular time versus today, and how has it shifted?
So when I started, it was coming off the heels of the media transparency challenges. And as a media agency CEO, I was pretty concerned about what that meant and the perspective that people had on media agencies. And so my focus was really about, how do we evolve? How do we shift that dynamic? How do we rebuild the partnership with the ANA and do more together as the buy side, with clients and agencies working more closely together? So I would say that's shifted, because now it's close to 8 years. And the wonderful thing about this business, it's dynamic and it is so fluid. And that's what keeps it exciting for so many people. So now there's new challenges and opportunities.
Yeah. And it's interesting you brought up, the alliance or partnership with the ANA, which for a lot of folks are like the Association for National Advertisers. And, one of the things that I wanted to cover, specifically because in the book, it was almost like a research, not almost, it really was, to where I really wanted to get some grounding in terms of, how do we get here with regards to the opportunity of having a third model for brands and businesses to choose in terms of marketing services that help accelerate inclusive growth. And so, one of the things that me and my research partner, we went all the way back to the formation of brands and corporations. And then obviously for anyone that's an entrepreneur, as these, corporations or brands form, people formed, became service providers. And then out of that, people said, hey, collectively, I think we could be stronger together versus separate. And so in one of the first chapters, we talk about the history of the industry associations and the role that they played in terms of the formation of the idea of quote unquote general and then multi, in terms of multicultural service providers. Can you talk a little bit about, first starting with the partnership that you have with the ANA and the ARF and how those came into form?
Sure. And obviously that predates me, because it's so long ago. The 4As was founded in 1917. I think it's great that you went back to look at the history, because it is so fascinating at that time. And the 4As and the ANA actually helped found the Ag Council. So it's ARF, and then you've got AEF and all these different associations that exist. And ultimately you exist because you're supporting a constituent that really needs advocacy, and it gives them the opportunity to come together without colluding, to share ideas, but not to create any sort of advantage for themselves that is in any way unfair. And so what the 4As is able to do is really to convene and bring people together as a community to support one another, but not to do anything that would be perceived as antitrust or anti-competitive in any way, because we are in a very competitive business, as you know. But the associations are so important, and I think it's kind of ebbed and flow in terms of what their role is and how it's evolved over time too.
Yeah, and the interesting part is, like, of your membership base, what percentage would you say are multicultural marketing agencies?
Mm-hmm. And it's not a significant percentage, and some of that is there are even associations that support, for example, like the Hispanic Marketing Council, but we do have multicultural agencies, but even they are evolving to be more culturally broader and to think differently. And even as agencies might have started out multicultural, they've expanded to be broader. And you talked about like this idea of general or total market. And I think back as an early media planner, and that's the way we used to think of it. But I had a client like Avon that kind of flipped it and said, no, we actually first we're going to target African-American, then we're going to target Hispanic. Like, we're really going to look at our business and where we need to focus. And I think we have to get rid of these terms, and we need to really think about inclusion. And I've often said that as a planner, we used to have to justify including targets, which made no sense to me. In a world of inclusivity, you should start with everyone is a potential for this product, and we should actually have to prove why they don't get included, and to really flip it, as you would say, to reframe the way we look
we
at
love
it.
that. Thank you.
Well, reframe is one of my favorite terms and ways of looking at things, because it's that different perspective and that way of understanding something, because that's the beauty of bringing lots of different people together. It gives you that different understanding.
Yeah, and I think there was a level of experience that I had to accumulate to challenge. And, reframe the marketplace is kind of a challenge playbook in terms of reevaluating the history of industry associations, reevaluating the industry in terms of how those services are procured, reevaluating how brands go to market and overall investments. Because, the question we're asking everyone that we talk to, it's been 10 years since the book is published, and one could argue nothing has really changed. Would you agree? Disagree?
I would say some things have changed and there's more awareness, but that doesn't mean we've had the right kind of impact or shifts that need to happen, because people fall into their rote patterns and areas of comfort. And we, unfortunately, in the marketing world we live in today, are focused on risk mitigation and short-termism. And the only way that you really can change and have a shift from a paradigm perspective, I believe, is to focus on the long term. And so you need incentives to be aligned to that more closely than the way they are today.
And when for those who haven't read the book, we talk about the industry association, and literally the book is more or less a documentation of what happened as we were trying to build a practice called Ogilvy culture at that particular time.
Right.
And we went to the 4As, not to the 4As. I mean, we went to the ANA and said, hey, we'd like to introduce this new approach. It's more cross-cultural for the total addressable audience. And they said, great, we'd love to have you in your sponsorship, of course. But we want you to present at the multicultural conference.
Right.
And, I'd come up on the brand side and did, well, why would you do that? Like, I'm at Ogilvy. Like, we don't necessarily have to start with multicultural consumers. We start with the total addressable audience, which is inclusive of both general and multi. And so it was a tough go to get the content included at the Masters of Marketing conference. And still to this day, there was a lot of resistance with regards to the language, the taxonomy, the reallocation, because in my mind, given my origins career-wise, you're bringing this innovation to the industry so that you have a more effective and efficient outcome in terms of how you show up, in terms of go-to-market, how your investments, your talent, and resources. But 15 years ago, it's really met as a perceived threat. And so when you think about that timestamp till today, I don't want to say the industry has been resistant to change, but what are the barriers and conversations that you've been involved in to become more of an inclusive industry and association as a whole?
I think part of it is it's not just talking about it, but it's finding the right people that can influence and drive that change. And your point about it's not enough to have that conversation at a multicultural conference. I fully believe that's absolutely right. It's the same way. Why is it always the people who are part of the inner circle that have to drive the change? It should be the people on the outside or who are able to do that and bring that awareness. So the 4As has really focused on how do we educate? How do we make sure people are having those conversations? How do we support more inclusivity? But ultimately, it comes down to not just what the agencies are communicating, but how do you get the clients to buy into that? And part of the problem is also how they're structured. So people fall into these silos typically, and I used to see this a lot. The agencies often try and evolve quickly and try and get their clients to follow suit. But then there's a misalignment of, well, you're structured one way and the client structured another way. And how do we align this? And then the other problem is when dollars get divided up into those silos, because then you're talking about a bottom up versus a top down approach. It really takes the big marketers to go out there and be bold and brave and say, this is how we do it. This is how you do it. I don't think those conversations are still clear on how you do it effectively, and it's still getting siloed too much. And that's part of it is people protecting their budgets and the comfort level of this is the way we've always done this, which I do not appreciate. We are in a business that is supposed to be about innovation and change and either iteration, evolution, even revolution. And so we need to be putting that more at the forefront. The reality is focus in on your customer base, but not just for today, for the future. Look at where the volume is going to be coming from. Look at, the demographics are the destiny. So people need to start paying attention.
And, you mentioned a little bit in terms of the media piece. I think I'd still remain hopeful, right? And mainly because, to your point in terms of the people and, the customers driving the decisions, but the structure piece is still there from an organizational standpoint oftentimes.
Yes.
Do you foresee the role of technology helping to change those structural barriers that may exist where you are hyper focused in terms of general and multi? Or do you think it becomes even that much harder?
It should become easier because you have the data and the understanding of how to aggregate. It should be easier, but that doesn't mean that people won't somehow interpret it and make it more complex than it needs to be.
Yeah, and as you think about, the next generation of agencies and marketers, what does the future look like? Because, I like to say, with reframe the marketplace, we kind of, put the bomb out there and to see it explode and see if it would get some traction. And it did. I think there's, some results. We've now had over, 40 customer engagements using the framework, but I still see, there was a little bit of a halo of change post George Floyd, but now there's like a retraction from an investment standpoint. And that's, I tend to speak more from an economic perspective, right?
That
We're
is what drives our
capitalists.
business. Let's face it.
So I tend to look at the numbers in terms of investment. Um, where do you think the disconnect is in terms of ambition versus outcome of being more
I
inclusive?
don't know if it's about I don't even know if it's about ambition versus outcome versus playing it safe and versus the risk. And we're in a business where pendulums swing back and forth. And right now the pendulum is swung a particular way. And so people are leaning into that across a variety of areas. And I don't know that people might say that it's the right way, but I will say for many, it's the easy way.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is the path that they are pursuing. From an inclusion standpoint, there's still so much opportunity. And we see that companies are trying to embed and integrate it versus trying to maybe have it viewed in a siloed way. So if that is truly the intent, that is positive, but we need to see if that's really what the intent is and if that is the way it's going to manifest over the next couple of years.
And now, I think, I think it's been publicly announced that this is your last year, right?
Yes, I will be leaving at the end of May. So we are in the midst of finding my successor now.
When you think about, when you came into the seat that you're in and you think about what you know now versus what you didn't know when you came in, around the idea of the agency model, what have you learned over those years, and how or what advice or counsel would you give to the next person showing up?
So I think it's important when we say agency model, there is no one model. There are multiple models, and ultimately it comes down to what a client needs to deliver. And I think that's what's also so exciting. If you look at various registries of how many agencies there are, and I told you we have 600 plus with 1,200 offices, there are supposedly 13,000 plus agencies. I mean, you could be a single person and be an agency, and technology really enables you to do so much with fewer people these days. And so the ability to just hang up a shingle and say, hey, I'm starting my agency, you read about it all the time. Now, what we want is for those to be successful. So I look back, and the business model at the time, well, I can tell you things didn't exist at that time, and that's what always keeps it exciting. No one was talking retail media networks. No one was talking about the idea of creator marketing as much, maybe influencers a bit and social media, or even this idea of decision maker marketing, which is now kind of getting to be something that people are looking at. So I just think what's so exciting is that it is always changing, but I don't know that I could have better prepared myself at the time. I mean, hindsight, of course, is always interesting. But people always want to know what's the right model. There's no right model. There really isn't. And that's what keeps the competition going, for people to keep thinking about different ways. And think about when you first launched Culture inside of Ogilvy, you were doing something very bold and different that no one else had done. And other people started paying attention to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, excited in terms of the impact that it was making has made, because, quite frankly, culture is just often used word, but as a planner, you're supposed to be like the ear to the ground when it comes to culture, irrespective of where the source of truth comes from. And so,
right,
it's been great to watch it. And I think that's one of the reasons we're like revisiting the book, because it's evergreen, which is crazy.
Which is great.
But for me, it was about like being in marketing class in South Carolina, reading the book Principles of Marketing. Kotler, I think, was the author, and it's like little itty bitty chapter on multicultural marketing. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. That was like the first inspiration. But then as I got into the different roles on the brand side, it became even more evident in terms of the inequities associated with acquiring those marketing services, and that was troubling to me, and it continues to be troubling. And so, when you look at the future of the 4As, um, how, not to say that it isn't, but how is it that it becomes more inclusive where you don't have the Hispanic Marketing Association? I think there are offsprings of Asian. I think they have their own, and
Yeah.
not, I know there have been other reflections of African American, but how do you bring them together so it's a much more collective and holistic approach, or maybe not? What do you think about that?
No, we do. And a lot of the multicultural agencies that are in our membership that are covering so many different, that are really addressing so many different needs and audiences, a lot of them have expanded to say, well, we started out more narrow, but now we're broader and we're total culture. And so that's also expanding the conversations. But we do try and bring those teams together when we can, because I think they all recognize that they're in similar situations if they stay narrow and niche, because they get pushed to a particular silo within a client and a particular budget. And that's not how you break out of this, here, let's just put some money here and here and here. That's not how you really get to total market. You have to really be able to challenge that and to think differently. But it is important for the 4As to be bringing people together and championing that.
Well, awesome. Now, as we close, is there anything that you would have maybe done different in your tenure?
Oh, do I have
No
regrets?
regrets. No regrets.
Oh,
No.
would have done differently. I always can make a list of things that I would have done differently, but I always tell people the decision that you make in the moment is the right decision based on the information that you have. It's only later that you get more information and you have a sense of it that you recognize that maybe it wasn't the right decision, or you might have done things differently. And it's that's okay, because you learn and you grow. I think that's the most important part, though, is you have to learn and you have to grow. So yes, there are definitely things I can look back and say, I wish maybe I did this differently or that differently. But on the whole, I can look and see what the team has accomplished, and I'm really pleased with where we're at and just continuing to evolve and grow.
No, well, look, hey, we're excited about what's to come from those decisions that you've made. I think the industry is in great shape, so you're leaving it in great hands and capable. And when I look back at when we first started doing the research for the book, I'd had conversations with the 4As. It meant to be a little disruptive, right? We got to have a little fun.
Absolutely.
But I do think the direction is definitely headed in a progressive way, and every year I think more and more transparency evolves from both the buyers of the services and the people providing the services, because I think it gets to your point, the people have changed, and so it's something that you can't avoid, or you're not going to get the highest market share, because your competitors are going to be taking it. And I think it stands for the people that are providing those services as well. So I think it's a great start to the season, and want to thank you for joining us and giving us some context, because I think as we get into the other conversations where we talk to the clients, we talk to the people in terms of how disruptive within Ogilvy it was hard to birth it. I think having some education in terms of the industry associations, because these were the organizations that educated its members, educated, from a content perspective in terms of equalizing and balancing resources that some of the smaller agencies may not have been able to get. And I think the 4As allows for that opportunity as a whole. And I want to thank you and your service.
Thank you. And thank you for continuing to push and try and help our industry evolve.
We're going to get there. We're going to get there.
We are. It just takes
Yeah.
longer.
Yeah.
We need more champions.
Well, thank you again for your time.
Sounds good. Thank you.